You have to do that to sync up the audio.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Henry!
Okay, first episode. This is big. Let's big.
Go.
Okay. So we were kind of talking before. We wanted to talk a little bit about like why we're doing this and then kind of the meaning behind the name of our podcast, Cherish the True Seeker. So I don't know if you wanted to start and maybe say a little bit about why you want to do it, and then I can go.
Yeah, sure. So, well, first of all, I think I have a lot of ideas about certain events that are, I guess, funny. I don't know. I have a lot of takes on different events that I think are a lot different than what people are fed by CNN, Fox News, all of those mainstream media places. So I feel that an alternative form of media is really going to sort of take lead over many of these traditional news outlets, because I think people are becoming more and more distrusting of the news. And even though we're only two guys with no history of anything in media, and you probably shouldn't listen to us, I feel like we're probably still more accurate than all of those big players in the media game.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I was kind of thinking like it seems like there's no long form discussions about anything anymore. And like, I mean, the rise of TikTok, like everyone, like we're both on TikTok. We both use TikTok a lot. And that's like 15-second videos, a minute max. And people, there's so much politics on TikTok, like too much politics on TikTok. And I think those discussions are like too nuanced to do in like a minute video that has like, there's no discussion, there's no kind of communication at all. And so I don't know, for me it felt like a way, like doing this felt like a way that we could kind of get that discussion out there and hopefully eventually engage with an audience that we can discuss with that and like talk to people that have different viewpoints so that we get a different perspective. Because I mean, we're two white guys from Utah, so so but I think the goal is to get to a point where we can have those discussions with other people that have different perspectives. And so for me, that's kind of why I felt like I wanted to do this personally, and I think we kind of agreed on that.
Right.
Yeah. And then the name, like Cherish the True Seeker, it comes from a Voltaire quote and he's kind of the guy that like free speech, which I think is a big thing for both of us, is like free speech is super important and being able to have discussions and stuff. And so the Voltaire quote is, and I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember it exactly, but it's like, cherish those that seek truth, but beware those that find it. And I think for me that was like meant like those that find like truth and are very powerful, like that's one of the best things you can do to like help yourself and like help others and around you is by finding real truth. And then coupled with kind of Voltaire's ideology of free speech, I think I'm making an assumption here, but I think he means through discussion, through speech is how you find that truth. And so that's kind of where the name came from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the quote, I don't know about you, but I think free speech is probably like top 3 issues that I'm most concerned about,
if not number 1.
Right. Going forward, I think free speech is starting. I don't know if there's been any real attacks on free speech, but I think that just the forum that people are discussing things and the regulation there's obviously issues with banning certain ideologies, shadow banning certain ideologies. All of these things, although they're not necessarily in law, are the stepping stones to banning free speech.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's coming. Like if it's not happening yet, I mean, Twitter is one like that's crazy to me because it's such a big forum. It's like not everyone uses it, but a lot of people use it, and it's like a big place for discussion. Like a ton of conversation happens there. But it seems like, and we're both like, neither of us are like very conservative, but I think both of us have discussed in the past how we've seen kind of conservative ideologies and viewpoints being censored on platforms like that. And I think both of us feel that's like pretty problematic and could lead to like worse censorship and stuff like that.
Right. Or I feel like even liberals have something to be worried about too, because look, if a liberal gets banned for talking negatively about some platform or some forum, I mean, that's just as bad. I think if you can't criticize the forum that you're discussing it on, I mean.
Oh, for sure. Like, what was the other day? There was, I mean, I listened to Tim Pool a little bit, and he's like very liberal, but he's come out hard against kind of the censorship. And I know he's talked to like, there was a Joe Rogan interview where he talked to like the Twitter CEO and stuff, but he's like super liberal. And when he criticizes that stuff, he gets just dragged on Twitter and YouTube and stuff like that, even though for the most part he agrees with the ideologies of the people that are coming out against him. So that, I mean, that's another step, that you're not even safe from that censorship, even if you agree with the people. If like in most aspects, if there's anything you disagree on, then you get censored. You get like, and if not officially by the company, by the people on the platform that call for like your removal. And it seems like a lot of times like Twitter and like different places kind of cave to that, kind of cave to the court of public opinion, instead of being the forum that they kind of initially set out to be, where there's like room for open discussion.
Right. Yeah, it's weird that, you know, I relate in the sense that Twitter can ban whoever they want. It's a private business. But where things start to get tricky is you're banning one political ideology, flat, like blanket bans almost, and then the other political ideology, you're giving like a warning, or you're giving some remedy for not being banned. That's what seems unfair to me. Because, look, I think Twitter, for the most part, does a better job than other platforms. I think that if you look at like platforms like Facebook or YouTube, I think these platforms are at times more likely to ban conservatives, or even just flat out talk about those things. And like, we may even get shadow banned over the course of this podcast, but it's like
talking about stuff like that.
But it's like these big companies are choosing who gets to have a voice, and I don't think they realize how important the people who use their service, how much of an impact that can have on an election.
Well, yeah, it's like when things that are happening on your platform are like changing the world. I mean, like stuff that's getting posted to Twitter or YouTube or Facebook or whatever is like changing the world and enacting like major social change, major political change. And so when you start banning one side of the argument, especially, and there's a little bit to be said, like they're a private company, so they like, I kind of come from the idea that they can do what they want. But if you're going to try and prop yourself up as this impartial platform, then I think you have to treat like your audience and as kind of impartial, and you can't, and there's some stuff that for sure should get banned, but like when conservatives are like posting stuff and it's getting shadow banned for no reason, not breaking the terms of service or anything, just for having a different ideology, like that's problematic to me.
Look, Twitter's, all these different platforms are becoming editors, right?
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
deciding what and when to publish someone or something, and when not to publish something else. And that's fine. You can be an editor, but just don't complain when the government comes in and says, look, if you're going to act like an editor, we're going to treat you like an editor, and you're going to be held responsible. You're going to be held responsible for all of these doxes, all of these like terroristic threats that are made, like all of this stuff. You better get ready to be held responsible for that, and you better get ready to get sued.
Yeah, I thought that was crazy when Trump came out and was talking, and I don't support Trump in the slightest. Like don't. But when he came out and was talking about like Section 230 reform, which is the stuff that kind of gives social media and publishers kind of, and not publishers, they're not publishers, that's the distinction, is that they're platforms, and it gives them the distinction that they can't be held accountable for that.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump came out and was like, okay, we're going to reform that. If you're going to be like an editor instead of just like kind of a forum for discussion and like public debate, he came out and said that, and the reaction was like, Trump's attacking free speech, and like people were losing their minds over it, which I thought was crazy, because to me that seems like a fight for free speech, to hold those platforms accountable for like being biased towards a certain ideology.
And it's just the double standard, right? The fact that before you talked about Trump, you had to say, look, I don't support Trump.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I'll say it too. Like, this is where liberals begin to lose me, right? Forcing someone to say, look, I'm not a Trump supporter before they even begin talking, that is so dangerous, and that's like such a bad precedent to set for future discourse. Like, I don't expect someone to tell me before they start talking, I support blah blah blah.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's like, and like I said, neither of us support Trump, but you can take the good and the bad, right? Trump enacted criminal justice reform with bipartisan support. It passed almost unanimously in the Senate.
Well, in trying to pull troops out of like Afghanistan, like that's
these
a good thing.
These should be nonpartisan issues, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But because it's someone doing it, it suddenly becomes bad. And look, liberals aren't the only one that does this.
Oh,
conservatives
for sure.
are
All
just
the
as
time.
bad. If you support Bernie Sanders, you're a socialist. If you support Joe Biden, you're crazy. It's like conservatives know how to play the game, and so do liberals. I think that the way that the discourse has been happening as of the last 10 years has been moving to mostly online.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's making it dangerous, because you have, on one side of the equation, you're going to a platform that can regulate the speech that you say, and you're going to a platform that can regulate how long and how many words you get to say, right?
Exactly.
Putting
It's
those two things together,
you
can't create a good argument with a 15-second TikTok clip. Like,
Yeah,
you're not
what
going
do
to
you-
convince anyone of the opposite ideology.
I think it just creates an echo chamber, right? You
All
get all
you're
the
going to
people in
do
the
is get
comments.
people in your comments saying, go off, like, so true.
Yeah.
Or, like, that's exactly what it does. And that's exactly what TikTok wants it to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, well, I saw a study the other day that was talking about, they did an interview about people that felt that they could kind of share their opinions, and the only group, and it was like on a scale, it was like far right, moderate, left, far left. The only group that said that they felt that they could share their opinions publicly was far left.
Really?
And I think that's scary, because even if I don't agree with an ideology, like, there's something to be said for like discussion and understanding for most ideologies. There are some that are like beyond the pale that shouldn't kind of even be entertained, but it's like most ideologies, like, there should be room for discussion. These people shouldn't be scared to like give their opinion, share their experience and stuff like that. And I think that's really scary when you get to a point where there's one certain ideology, especially when that ideology keeps moving their goalposts. Like, the far left in America today is so different than the far left 10 years ago, and will be unrecognizable from the far left in 10 years. And so when those goalposts are changing, it's like you just keep losing people because people fall off the bandwagon, and then eventually it's like 3% of the population that feels like they can share their opinion, and then that's all that gets covered in the news, that's all that gets like published, and then that's a problem for regular like Americans, everyone else, when 97% of the population is like, we can't like say what we think about different things.
Right. Yeah, it's a weird time for discourse in the United States. It's a weird time for media. I think people's opinions are shifting very quickly. I think, like you said, liberals have gotten more liberal, and I think that conservatives have gotten more conservative with the election of Trump.
Yeah, I don't even know about that, because I think Trump is the least conservative like president ever.
Right, but his whole shtick is playing to the conservative values, right? His whole shtick with like law and order, federal troops in U.S. cities, which is the first time that's been done in a long time. He's invoking the Insurrection Act.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are all steps to cater to his base, which is a conservative base. You know, Trump supporters are interesting because I think that they support Trump more for his rhetoric, more for his position on one or two issues, the economy, or like something like that, right? But that's why Trump talks so much about the economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he's not going to address different issues of American life because he doesn't have to. If the economy is good, that's why people voted for Trump. You know, he's sort of taking, and I think you're right. Is he the most conservative president? No. Does he have the most conservative followers? I think yes. I think if you look at this next election, I think you're going to see a lot of moderate conservatives voting for Joe Biden because they feel they have no other choice.
And see, I don't know if I agree with that. I'd almost say the other way, like it's going to happen the other way, that you're going to see a lot more like moderate liberals voting for Trump. I think that, I mean, like, I think it's crazy to me that Trump has had to, like, send federal troops into cities to, like, protect law and order. And I think people are going to be scared that, like, that kind of chaos is going to come to them and going to be like, well, if we vote for Trump, because he's come out against that stuff, whereas, like, Joe Biden has come out in support of it. I think the average American, not the Twitter, like, SJW that kind of gets, like, has the microphone that speaks the loudest that you can hear. I think the average American is going to be like, well, I mean, I don't want this to go any further. I don't want this to come to my neighborhood. Like, I think Trump will get their votes. And I think the polling's starting to show that.
See, I disagree. I disagree with Trump having to send federal troops into these cities. I don't think he should have done that in the first place. And I think a lot of people see that, right? When you have Republican senators like Rand Paul, who's probably the most real conservative Senate member, coming out and saying, Trump, this is taking away our freedoms. Like, this is not okay, when they were pushing protesters into unmarked cars. Like, these are the kinds of steps that a suburban mom in, like, you know, central Ohio, she's going to look at all of the things Trump has said and done, and that's who he had trouble winning last election, was suburban moms. Yeah. I think he's going to have the same problem. He has done nothing to redeem those people, and so I think for sure they're going to be, if they voted for Hillary Clinton, they're going to be voting for Joe Biden. We know that. And the next question is, how many people is Joe Biden going to pull off Trump? And I think that there's going to be more people that he's going to pull off Trump than Trump is going to pull off Hillary voters.
Yeah, maybe. I just think, I don't know. I think if we know anything about America, is that there's a large contingent that's, like, against, like, fine with the status quo, fine with, like, kind of not having chaos, having, like, a little bit of order, even if it's not what they, like, ideologically agree with. I mean, like, Reagan won all but one state, and he did pretty good for the economy, but there was a ton of other stuff that he did that was, like, not good, that I think people would find, like, objectionable for sure. But because there wasn't a strong challenger, and I don't think Joe Biden's a strong challenger, I think against any other, like, person besides Trump, Joe Biden gets, like, they wipe the floor with him, because I think he's a super weak politician personally, but I just think I don't know. And this is like, I have no data or anything to back this up besides a few polls that are coming out and showing Trump's support at like the highest it's ever been. But other than that, like, I don't know. I just feel like people like the status quo besides a small contingent that's trying to tear down like major systems, and that might win votes for Trump because he's come out against that.
I could see that. I mean, if you don't think Joe Biden is a strong contender, would you have preferred Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, I think Bernie Sanders, I don't agree with all of his policies by a long shot, but I think he's less. I mean, I think Joe Biden has shown signs of like mental decline that is like frightening, like possibly like clinical dementia. And I don't think Bernie Sanders showed that at all. And I think Bernie Sanders seems like a guy that's more genuine. I don't know. I hate hypocrites. And I think Joe Biden's a hypocrite on a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And Bernie Sanders seems like, I know what I'm getting, straightforward. Like, he tells you what he's going to do, and he doesn't seem like he's going to change that. And so I would take that over Joe Biden.
Yeah. They were calling him a socialist on the debate stage, and he was like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know what you're going to get with Bernie Sanders, and you don't know what you're going to get with Joe Biden.
Yeah.
You're talking about consistency. I don't think anyone knows what they're going to get with Trump. I think that they know a few things. They know that he's going to go up there and say whatever he wants. They know that he cares about what absolutely no one thinks about him in his cabinet. He'll just fire them.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Andrew Jackson did the same thing.
Not exactly the standard bearer for good presidents,
right.
But
well, I think I don't know. Trump reminds me of Andrew Jackson in a lot of ways because both of them were populists that came in and just completely disrupted the system.
Yeah,
I don't even think Trump knows what the word populist means. I don't.
But he is a populist.
He's a semi-populist. Like when
he's
he
as
passed,
populist as you can get in a two-party like oligarchy, basically.
Sort of. I could see that. I personally see Bernie Sanders as more of a populist than Donald Trump.
Yeah, I could see that.
Trump came in and, the tax reform bills that didn't benefit the middle class. Like, these are all things that Trump has done, like, that I think, well, just because his rhetoric has been, look, we're going to bring back jobs, we're going to strengthen the economy, he has. But I think that he definitely caters to his wealthier base.
Yeah, and I think, and it's weird. Like, America's two-party system sets it up where we have two parties that both cater to the wealthy elites on either side of the ideological spectrum, and you don't have a choice. And that's why, like, I think, like, anti-establishment kind of politicians, like Trump was supposed to be, like, people thought he was going to be, and Bernie Sanders and, like, Andrew Yang got popular like they did, at least had, like, a decent following among, especially like the younger voter bloc. All those people were, the amount of young Trump supporters I see is crazy. I'm like, you guys don't know, like 13-year-old kids on TikTok like making videos about Trump. I'm like, what do you guys know about politics? But it's the same side. Like, there are Bernie Sanders that are 12 years old that it's like, you can't vote. Like, you can have an opinion, and I totally support people, like, forming opinions and learning about politics and stuff, like, early. But it's like, it seems like those anti-establishment characters definitely gain support among the younger generation as opposed to, like, an older generation that supports kind of just the status quo, to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if in a head-to-head contest between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, I think Bernie Sanders takes the cake because they're very similar in a lot of ways. They're very similar on trade. Their economic stance, as much as people don't want to believe it, is actually similar. They both want to strengthen... I shouldn't say they both want to strengthen the middle class because I think Bernie Sanders actually does, and I think Donald Trump is like, that's his rhetoric. That's his rhetoric. That's something that may come along with the economy getting better, but we've seen that it hasn't. So I think that people are getting really sick and tired of the political establishment that has dominated the politics in this country for so long. I think they're getting really sick and tired of seeing endless wars started for no reason. I think people generally are getting more liberal, as much as some people may not believe that. I think people are swinging more liberal. And I think that you give it 10 years, 15 years, Bernie Sanders will get elected.
Oh, for sure.
Within the next 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
And I think that what the DNC did to Bernie Sanders over the past 2 runs...
That was crazy. That's crazy.
There should have been jail time. And it just shows that the establishment has real control, right? Because the fact that they rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Like... Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the DNC chair, literally had to resign because she rigged the... I shouldn't say rigged, but it was pretty close to rigging. It was about as close to rigging as you can get. She resigns. She becomes a congresswoman. It's like... This is like a movie, right? Everything you see, it's like House of Cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bill Clinton said House of Cards was 90% accurate.
Yeah, there's so much crazy stuff that's going on, and it's like, yeah, there's so much stuff we don't know that we haven't seen that's in the light. So the stuff that we've seen is so bad, that shows that there's major establishment, there's a major a major establishment that's gonna fight against any anti-establishment candidates that try and run.
Yeah, they did it to Trump.
And they did it to Trump.
The Republican Party did it with Trump.
Mm-hmm. They did it to Yang, when he was running, on CNN, when they showed the wrong picture on the debate. How crazy is that? And you can't tell me
steps.
You can't tell me that's not super intentional to try and just throw it off so that you can have just your Hillary Clinton, your Joe Biden win back the presidency running on complete Trump hate. And that's another thing, the blind hate of Trump and the Republican Party is weird to me, that there's no nuance to any of the debate. It's not about policies, it's not about it's just we hate Trump. And I don't think a candidate is gonna win running on not being Trump.
Or think about this, saying all Trump supporters are racist.
Yeah.
Look, this is what drives me crazy about liberals. They'll say all Trump supporters are racist, and when the election time comes, they don't even make an effort to change their mind, and then they wonder why they lose the election.
How do you draw people across the aisle, which you lost last time? So you need to draw people across the aisle to win again?
Right.
You're not... By saying the same thing that you said in 2016 times 10 in 2020 isn't going to draw people, convince people for the most part that you're right now. Why, if they didn't believe you then, if they weren't with you then, and until coronavirus, Trump's economy was good. It's one of the best ones we've had in years, and I think a lot of Americans, are fine, right? If they're, what do they care about, foreign relations with North Korea if they're making money, if they're doing better, if they can buy stuff for their family.
See, I want to push back on that a little bit, because I think that most Americans probably aren't doing fine, and I don't think it's Trump's fault. I think that, look, Trump had an opportunity to pass tax reform that could have changed a lot of lives. It could have literally redefined the middle class.
Yeah.
And he didn't. Right. The conservatives have continually chosen to back presidents that are going to give tax cuts for the very wealthy and nothing for the middle class.
It's trickle-down economics.
Right. And look, Joe Biden, as crazy as he is, and this is what drives me crazy about him, is he has this opportunity to really play to the middle class.
It should be the easiest election.
It should be the easiest election in years. But he doesn't. Instead, he wants to talk about the protests, which is okay. You can talk about the protests. He wants to talk about how evil Trump is. He wants to talk about all of these different things. He wants to talk about the environment. That's fine. He wants to talk about these different talking points, right?
Yeah.
Instead of talking about those things, if you want to get elected, talk to the middle class. The middle class makes the decisions in this country,
Exactly.
right?
He's playing to 10% of the population.
Right.
Instead of, like, if you're going to pander, there's much better groups to pander to than a small portion of the population that really doesn't have a lot of political power yet. And their political power is growing because I think there's...
And you're talking about the radical, like
radical leftists, yeah. And I think their political power is growing because there's a, like... That's all you see on like CNN, on like Twitter, stuff like that. And so I think it seems like they're a much bigger group. In reality, I think it's 8 to 10% of people are like on the radical left.
Right.
The like middle class, even though it's shrinking, is so much bigger than that in America. So if you had a candidate that came out and said, "We're doing everything we can for the middle class," like, I think you'd win the election in a landslide.
Right.
In a landslide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of those people in the middle class did vote for Trump just because he was saying jobs, we're going to come in, we're going to drain the swamp. Because I think people are becoming desperate, right? The middle class is becoming desperate. Mm-hmm. Bernie Sanders pops up, an anti-establishment candidate that wants to pull us out of all wars, cut the budget, do all of these things, raise taxes, and implement free Medicare for all. That's a candidate that pops up when people are desperate for change, right?
Exactly.
Trump is a candidate that gets elected when people are desperate for change.
Mm-hmm.
Until someone comes along and addresses the real issues without pandering to like the wealthy or pandering to
just a
super
minuscule
leftists,
portion of
right,
the population.
until someone comes along like that, there's not going to be I think if someone does come along like that, it's going to be, first of all, one of the most biggest landslide elections ever, because I think people want so bad an anti-establishment candidate that just says what they want and wants to come in and change things up for the middle class.
Well, and what's crazy is it's like, as much as like the two parties seem so at odds with each other, but the stuff that the general public like disagrees with them on, like war and stuff like that, like war in the Middle East, most of the population doesn't think we should be in the Middle East, and like the defense spending should be decreased. Trump tried to pass a bill with like a smaller military budget, and Nancy Pelosi pushed through another bill with a larger military budget. Like, they agree on things that don't help the general population. Like, we have a $1 trillion military budget.
Close.
How crazy is that we're spending like a $500 billion military budget, half of what we have now, would still be the largest military in the world by a mile, and $500 billion a year. What, like the social programs you could do? Like, you don't have to defund the police. You can pay for those social programs that's supposed to do. Like, what is taking $1 billion from the NYPD gonna do?
Nothing.
Like,
it's going to raise crime is what it's going to do.
$500 billion a year that you could take from the military budget and still have the largest military in the world. Why doesn't that come out of the budget? And so I think there's a growing contingent of the American population that thinks like that, and it's only a matter of time before we start seeing change, but the establishment is going to fight against that hard.
Oh yeah, you'll see things come out. You'll see stories run in CNN and MSNBC that are just blatantly false. One thing that, when Bernie Sanders was on the debate stage with Elizabeth Warren, they ask him, "So did you say a woman cannot be president?" And he goes, "Yeah, I never said that. That's not something that I would ever say," which he probably didn't. Like, yeah, I don't. He's maintained the same record for so long. Yeah. He's like, "I never said that." And then they go to Elizabeth Warren and they're like, "So how did you feel when Bernie Sanders said that?" It's like, that is like the most blatant bias, the most blatant personal attack that you can do. And the funny thing is, people don't want to criticize that. The CNN, I think they'll stop watching, but it's like, people are not harsh enough on these media companies that are literally determining elections.
Yeah.
They're literally determining who can win an election, right? And it'd be okay if they claimed that they have bias. That would be one thing, right? You
but
can
to
claim
act
you
like
have
they don't
bias.
have bias.
To act like you don't have bias is unbelievably dishonest.
Yeah.
And that's why their ratings are dropping, right?
Tucker Carlson
Tucker
has the
Carlson
highest
is the
rated
only-
show ever,
right.
because I think people perceive him, and I don't agree with Tucker Carlson on a lot of things, but I think people perceive him as genuine, and he'll call out conservatives, liberals, like he'll call out people he doesn't agree with, which you don't see on, like, we talked about a little bit ago about like the Chris Cuomo thing on CNN.
Yeah.
Like, Governor Cuomo in New York did some crazy things that like killed people when like the
he told nursing homes
response.
they have to take coronavirus patients.
And
do you know anyone with half a freaking brain can realize that's not a good idea?
Like 70% of it was some crazy number of coronavirus deaths in New York came from nursing homes.
It's unreal.
And like I don't know, I haven't seen the data, but I would hazard a guess that policy had something to do with it. But what is Chris Cuomo doing on CNN?
Yeah, they're
making jokes about the swabs, like the size of the swabs is big. Nose.
They're talking about
like,
wanting to go back to New York Giants games. It's like, what are you guys talking about? And you know, say what you want about CNN, but this is what Jake Tapper called out. So that New York, the governor has been putting posters of like his successes, and it's like all fun and games, like, as New York, we stand together, and it's like all the things that he did. Mm-hmm. And Jake Tapper, his show aired, and I think he's probably the only honest politician on CNN left. But he comes up and he's like, "What are you talking about, right? Do you know how many people you have dead? Do you think this poster is going to help the families of those that are dead?"
Well, like the most coronavirus deaths and cases in the country.
No, you can't. See, but Henry, no one cares about how many deaths there is, because Governor Cuomo comes up on TV and he's like, "Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this, and then I'm gonna make a joke about the Giants game, and then I'm gonna talk to my Chris Cuomo because we're brothers."
Yeah.
It's like people. This is what is crazy about the media, is that probably got more ratings than like someone criticizing him or actual reporting on what is going on in New York. There are hundreds of thousands of people that have died in New York. And look, I think Andrew Cuomo is at fault, but I think on the same end, President Trump is just as at fault.
For sure.
This has been the most mismanaged, terrible thing I think I have ever seen in Trump's presidency.
Yeah.
And like, you know, he could have shut down, first of all, mask mandates didn't happen. Nationwide quarantine didn't happen. The stimulus relief was an absolute joke. $1,200 to each American.
That's crazy.
That's a joke. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Places like big businesses like Shake Shack got like $100 million or something like that. Money. What? Why is that happening? That shouldn't. And people get a one-time $1,200 check that's supposed to last them.
In Britain, they gave everyone 80% of their salary, and they just stayed home. Like, this is what I'm talking about with Trump, right? Him and Nancy Pelosi turned this into a politicized issue. We're the only probably the only country in the world that has done that.
It doesn't make sense. Like and it happened on both sides, right? At the start, when Trump shut down the border with China, and like a bunch of Democrats came out and were like, "Oh, that's like super racist. Like, you shouldn't be doing that." And then, knowing Trump, he came back 10 times harder and said, "Okay, anything like you guys agree with, I'm going against." And that just creates like waves going back and forth where you just get bigger and bigger backlash that hurts regular Americans. It hurts like the real people that actually have to worry about that stuff.
It's dangerous is what it is, and they don't care, right? These people in power, Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, none of them care if Americans die, right? All they care about is getting up and pandering, and with their talking points, talking about, here's why Trump is bad. Trump gets up. Here's why the Democrats are bad.
Yeah, exactly.
There are people literally dying. In Houston, they are putting dead bodies in trucks because their mortuaries are full. They don't care. Those issues don't want to be addressed by those in power, because all they want to do is get up on their stand and say, look, here's why blah 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 is evil.
Mm-hmm.
People are wisening up to that, right? People are getting smarter, and people are realizing, like, this system that we have right now is so corrupt. It's so broken. Like, ordinary Americans don't care about what these people in power think. And you want to know why Tucker Carlson's ratings are so high? It's because Tucker Carlson comes out and he'll criticize Jeff Bezos and say, this dude should not be making $113 billion, should not be worth $113 billion or what have you. He should not be getting $13 billion a day. People, like, want to hear that stuff. Mm-hmm. And on Fox News, I think it makes it more legitimate, because Fox News is a historically conservative network.
Yeah.
And Tucker Carlson's ideas are talking directly about the middle class. He's anti-establishment. He criticizes almost every war we've ever been in.
Yeah.
And these are all important things to Americans. And that's why his ratings are so high. Whereas you look at freaking Brian Stelter over at CNN, his ratings are low, and, you know, all of their ratings are low.
Well, Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon, did you see they ran a story the other day about, like, the mental acuity test that Trump took?
Yeah.
That, like, insane. And they, like, why is that being covered? Like, something Trump said in passing, and they spend, like, a good chunk of time talking about that, when that doesn't matter. Who cares? People are, like, what's the unemployment rate? Like, 20% or 30% or something like that.
It's an insane number.
And we're going to spend time talking about, like, there are legitimate things you can be criticizing Trump on. And you're going to talk about a mental acuity test that he said he took and did well on? And, like, waste time, like, taking the test and getting it wrong. They got it wrong. Did you hear about that?
What?
So there's one part of the test is there are animals. You have to, like, identify animals. There are, like, 3 animals on it. It was on this. So Don Lemon is taking it, and he's like, you got to identify the animals. There's the lion, the hippo, and the giraffe. And Chris Cuomo looks at it and he goes, you don't know the difference between an elephant and a hippo?
No.
An elephant and a hippo? Don Lemon got it wrong. But guess what? This is the craziest part. It was a rhino.
No.
It wasn't.
No.
I'm dead serious.
You're trolling. This isn't real.
This is completely legitimate. This happened. They were both wrong. Neither one got it right. In a segment that they're making fun of Trump for that stuff, they both get it wrong. It was one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
Oh my god.
And I'm shocked. And, like, you can say, like, it was just a mistake, but for one,
You can't, sure, it is just a mistake. Like, I probably, if I took that test, I'd probably make a mistake too.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wouldn't be the one sitting on my freaking pedestal criticizing someone for getting something wrong
They're making
getting it right.
millions of dollars a year to make fun of Trump. Like, that's what they're doing, just making fun of Trump. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like journalism has gone way downhill since, like, 2016, because I mean, the New York Times is, like, still a reputable news source, and, like, the Washington Post, but the amount of just, like, insane Trump opinion pieces that come out of those, like, publications is crazy. And it happened with Fox News too, like, everywhere. And that's why, I mean, bringing it back a little bit to why we're doing this podcast is because we're both, like, there's so much, like, information. Obviously, we're both not, like, completely unbiased, but it feels more real that we can, like, investigate stuff ourselves and talk about it instead of coming from a place where it's like there's all, like, it just doesn't feel real.
Right.
What these people are doing, like,
because it's not. Most of it isn't. Most of it is just weird. Like, it really is. It's just weird.
Well, like, the fact-checking things they do on Trump, that, like, there was this big Washington Post article, like, Trump has lied 18,000 times in his presidency.
It's like, give me a break.
Well, and then you start reading it, and it's like, oh, he, like, it's stuff that he's, like, exaggerating or joking, and it's just, and I think that's one problem that social media has caused with this stuff is that you get there's just these little sound bites or like headlines, and that's all people read, all people care about. We have 288 characters on Twitter to get your point across. And these nuanced discussions you can't be having on Twitter on like just a headline on a 15-second TikTok. But that's where people are getting all their information. And so you get those, and even if they're like these publications or people are wrong, they send out a tweet, say they tweet something and you find out it's wrong later. They send out like a subtweet underneath like correcting it. 10% of the people that saw the original tweet see it, and they don't care about that. They make money, they get outrage, and it's just, I think media is one of the most like corrupt institutions in America.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's what do you think about, to change subjects, what do you think about that Missouri couple, the ones that pointed their weapons at protesters?
That's bad, because I think, so for one, like, I don't think they should have pointed their guns at protesters, but under Missouri law, a state that has like the strongest castle doctrine like in law out of any state in the country, I mean, in Missouri, like, the law basically says if someone is trying to get onto your property, you can shoot them. Like, that's how strong that castle doctrine. There's no prerogative for the property owner to like try and remove themselves from the situation. You can just shoot somebody. So for one, like, I don't agree with what they did. I don't think they should have done that. But the fact that like the state came out to like prosecute them like that and charge them with felonies, I think that's crazy, because I mean, under Missouri law and like the Second Amendment, I think they exercised their rights. They exercised their Second Amendment right to bear arms and protect themselves and their property. And it seems crazy to me that they came out so hard against them.
Yeah, it's a political charge, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like, this is political prosecution. Like, this is politics literally interfering in the criminal justice system.
It's moral policing.
Right. And this is why I'm glad that our criminal justice system is set up how it is, because if you think for 1 second that they're going to go before a Missouri state judge and the judge is going to be like, you're guilty, or allow a verdict to return a guilty verdict, there is not a chance in any world that a judge is going to let that happen. And if he does, for whatever reason, that's going to get appealed and it'll go before the Missouri State Supreme Court.
Well, the governor said he'd just pardon him.
Right. And if he doesn't, Trump will. It's like,
yeah.
But that shouldn't have to happen, right? Like, the fact that they were defending their property, it doesn't matter if the protesters were on their property, off their property. They're on their private property. If they were pointing their weapons at people, which I don't know if they were, that would maybe be a different story.
Well,
because if they were on like a private road that's not owned by that family, it's not their right to start pointing weapons at them for being on a private road.
But I think under the Missouri like castle doctrine, it is. If someone's like trying to enter your property, I don't know, and I don't think they should have pointed their weapons at them. But sorry, you want to hear something else crazy? So the gun that the woman was pointing, the pistol, was inoperable.
No,
it didn't work because she's like some lawyer, like minor political figure in Missouri, but they used it for a court case. So the firing pin was turned backwards so that the gun couldn't possibly fire. They seized it when they charged him, took it to the crime lab. In the crime lab, the technicians disassembled it. And so what they were charged with is kind of based on whether the guns were like operable and could be like fired or used to cause harm. So the initial report was that it was inoperable. They said it was inoperable, kind of the original findings were that it was inoperable. They took it to the crime lab, disassembled it. When they put it back together, they flipped the firing pin so it was operable now. And then in their official report, they said it was fully operable. like they're doing the absolute most to try and incriminate these people, when in my opinion, like, there's not much legal standing for
It'll never
doing
hold
that.
up. It'll never hold up.
Well, you think it would, but you look at Portland, and like there are people that are getting charged with like arson. Like they post a picture with like next to something on fire, and they're like, yeah, like I did this, like bragging about it, planning it, like they have evidence that they planned it, going before grand juries, like getting let away scot-free, like concrete evidence of committing arson, committing other crimes, and the juries are letting him get away scot-free. So I don't know if in Missouri, what if the opposite thing happens? These people get up in front of a jury, and it's that moral policing.
Sort of the difference is, though, I think a judge, if they return a guilty verdict in like most states, a judge can just override it and say they're innocent.
That's true.
But I think you're right. It's like, what do you think about Roger Stone? What do you think about Trump pardoning Roger Stone?
I don't like it. Like, I think like Roger Stone like lied, whatever, did bad stuff, but also the stuff he lied about and got charged with was all fake. Like the Russiagate thing, not real, completely made up. And so it's like, so on false pretenses already, he lied, and that's what he got charged with. So it's like, why don't the people that lied in the first place get charged? Like the whole Russiagate thing was completely made up, and that's been proven.
Here's the thing, right? I actually think the Russiagate thing, there were some things in the Mueller report that'll make you blink twice and be like, that's pretty sketchy that they did that. But the problem was the Democrats blew it so out of proportion. Even before the report was released, they blew it so far out of proportion that no one could take. They looked at the report and they're like, "What the hell is this?"
Well, they just lied about things. Like they were like straight up. They were like, they said like there were reporters at CNN, MSNBC that said like, I've seen the report, I've seen the investigation, and this stuff is in it. There's concrete evidence of this stuff. Report came out, nothing. It's not there. The full report, unredacted, came out, nothing. There's nothing there. And so I think that just like even the little bit of stuff that was like true lost all, like everyone's like, why would we care about that when you set it up for this big like thing and completely lied about it?
See, I mean there were some charges. Roger Stone got indicted on 7 felonies.
Yeah.
One was he's such a psychopath. He threatened
to kill someone's dog, right?
He threatened to kill someone's dog. That was weird.
What?
A witness's dog.
Weird.
He threatened to kill their dog. It's like, oh. And did you see that he was on a podcast just a week ago or so? He said the N-word. He like full blown. He was on a podcast like me and you, and he was like talking to this guy, and he's like, I'm on the phone with some N-word.
No.
He said that, dude. He said that right out of jail. It's like, what?
That's crazy.
Yeah, unreal.
That's
dude.
so weird. And like, I think part of the problem is I think there's a difference. You have to differentiate between like Roger Stone and like Michael Flynn, because Michael Flynn, Trump didn't even have to pardon. Like he's gonna get acquitted, like by a jury, because he like the thing and the story.
Michael Flynn. I thought he was guilty.
He was, but then new stuff has like come out when all the like when Obamagate was trending. It like that information came out. So what Michael Flynn got charged with for like collusion. So he pled guilty. He made a call. He was the incoming like what was he, Secretary of State?
Who?
Michael Flynn. What was he?
National Security Advisor?
Yeah, National Security
like
Advisor. Yeah, so he called Russia to say, like, don't come down too hard, like don't retaliate for what Obama's doing, like, before we have time to get in and, like, mend relations. Totally within his, like, prerogative to like, do that as an incoming National Security Advisor, I think, in my opinion. And I think that's kind of showing with him he's gonna get acquitted. But then he so he does this, and then the Obama administration, and there's like evidence of this, like between the FBI, Obama, Biden, and all that stuff, they came out and were like, okay, he had this conversation, because they were like keeping track of that. They knew he had that conversation, and like, so how are we gonna like get this? Like, it's not that bad. And so what he got charged with was lying to like a federal agent in an informal conversation. It wasn't like off the record conversation. He like said something that wasn't true to like, so that Trump wouldn't look bad, even though there was nothing like there. And that's what he got charged with. And I just think that's crazy, but like that's why there's a big difference between that and like Roger Stone for me.
Right. I think it's just weird that Trump has limited political capital, and I find it so weird that he's like pardoning Roger Stone like during coronavirus. Like, he was guilty. Like, the verdict came back and he was guilty. Like, sure, the sentence was insane when it came out. It was like, I can't even remember how long it was. It was insane though.
Yeah.
But it's like, I feel like Trump has used all of his political capital for stuff like now he's backtracking on masks. He's like, everyone wear a mask. It's like, Trump, for so long you told people that like this, like, you literally almost said this was a hoax. Like, the rhetoric that you've been using, you've like used it all up. So like, the ordinary American like listens to something Trump says and they're like, oh, there's Trump. You know, it's like all the political capital he had is gone.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna hurt him. I think
sure.
he can redeem himself in the debates just because it's Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Look, if I was Joe Biden's team, I would just say, get on the debate stage, talk about Trump, talk about tax reform, talk about a declining middle class.
They're not going to do that.
Right. He will go up there and he'll talk about who knows what.
Orange man bad.
Probably Russia. He'll probably bring up Russia, the Russiagate thing. He'll probably talk about how he's the most immoral president ever. It's like, no one wants to hear you. Like, no one wants to hear those talking points anymore. If Joe Biden got up there and said, here's how we're going to fix the middle class. I have a 5-step plan. We're going to tax these people. We're going to do this. We're going to, reform this. Dude, he would probably win the election in a landslide. He would win all of those swing states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, like all of these states. By a mile. Oh, absolutely. Right? But it's not going to happen. This is what frustrates me about like the Democratic Party, and that's why Bernie Sanders, like, if Bernie Sanders got up on that debate stage with Trump, Bernie Sanders would probably eviscerate him. Bernie Sanders is very good at communicating what he thinks quickly, and Trump is not very good at communicating a policy position quickly. Trump is more of a person that like comes out and like says something like a gotcha, like,
well, he's like a shock jock that became president.
Right. I always think about that debate he had with Hillary, where Hillary's like, it's a good thing that no one with the temperament of Donald Trump is running the criminal justice system in our country. And Donald Trump goes, yeah, because you'd be in jail.
It's stuff like that. And against Joe Biden, he'll eviscerate him with stuff like that.
Yeah, dude.
But against someone, I mean, like, and I liked Yang a lot in the Democratic primaries. I was a fan. But someone like Yang, Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard.
Even Elizabeth Warren,
I think. And I don't like a lot of stuff about her. But yeah, like any of those people, anybody besides Joe Biden. How do you pick Joe Biden? That's the craziest thing to me.
And isn't it interesting that like Bernie Sanders was like super high in the polls for like a long time, and then one week it's like the polls switch like 40% all of the sudden. It's real interesting how stuff like that works.
Kind of
like,
scary.
Coincidence, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. That's weird, and definitely I think there's no proof that anything sketchy is going on, but it's like you look at something and you're like, that's kind of weird.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's it'll be interesting. So if you had to choose today, like, who do you think gets elected, Trump or Biden? If the election was today.
Today, I think probably Biden.
Yeah. You think the debates will switch it?
After the debates, I think Trump will win, and after all this stuff, all with the like protests and stuff, after that all plays out and kind of calms down, and after coronavirus calms down, if it does at all before November, like, I think the best thing that could happen for Trump's campaign, if, like, good news about a vaccine for coronavirus comes out,
that'd be huge.
I think he would win in a landslide.
And you know what he'd say? He'd be like, we came out with a vaccine, very strong vaccine, the best vaccine.
Great, the best vaccine.
And we made it here in America. I'm actually the one that told them to start testing for it.
I made Trump vaccine.
He's like, I know.
He'd call it Trump vaccine. It'd be insane. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Going back to, like, Russiagate, biggest national security threat to the United States?
China,
Same.
hands down. Well, did you see the consulate in Houston?
Yeah.
Burning documents.
It's not real.
They're
on our soil, dude.
They were spying
in our country
on coronavirus research. They stole $1 billion worth of coronavirus research. And then when, like, the Trump administration found out, they started burning documents in broad daylight. That's how little they care about. They
don't even try to hide it.
It's not hidden at all.
And this is like so weird that liberals have, like, chosen to make Russia this bad guy.
It's like the Cold War again.
Look, Russia's not a good country. Putin is not a good person.
No.
But, like, at least they're not obvious about.
They're on the downfall, and I think they're on the downfall.
Right,
like,
their economy is going nowhere compared to China. China's economy is booming, and I think that you give it 15 years, I think China's economy is going to hit one of the biggest recessions it's ever seen, just because of their aging population. And I think that,
but they're working. I mean, China, especially now and recently, like, they're working with, like, the next 50 years in mind, instead of US, where it's like,
look at them investing, look at them freaking colonizing Africa. They're like putting military bases in Africa, giving them, like, high interest loans, like, all of this stuff is going on. And look at their investment in education, AI, like, all of these things, like cybersecurity, all of this stuff that China's doing. It's like the United States, like, as much as I love our political system, like, sometimes I wish things would just get done. Like, for example, we're spending almost $1 trillion on military. I think if you take half of that and put it into education, AI, cybersecurity research, like,
we jump back
technology
to
advancements,
way ahead of any other country on the planet.
Oh, absolutely. And that's China. You're right. China's playing the long game, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas Russia is like, I feel like you know what you're going to get with Russia. Like, when they came out, when it was found out that they were putting bounties on U.S. military heads, like
what is that?
You know, that's right. You know what you're going to get. Like, as much, like, I think personally that's an act of war.
Yeah.
But it's like, you can't go to war with Russia over something like that. You gotta choose a hill to die over.
Yeah.
But it's like, China is blatant in their attacks on American democracy. I think Russia is getting involved in elections, like, on social media or what have you.
I don't think as much as China, though.
Right. And I don't think what Russia has been doing or China really is having an effect. I've never subscribed to the belief that you go on social media and, like, you see some weird Russian ad or, like, it's going to change your mind. Like, the politics in the United States are so, like, radicalized. Like, nothing that you see like that is going to change your mind.
The idea
it would take, like, a big policy.
2016 election got decided by, like, Russian bots.
It didn't.
That's crazy.
It didn't.
And I think any of that is a threat to our democracy. So you can't discount it for, like, the small amounts.
Yeah, I think it's an act of war.
If you look at it, like, empirically, it didn't swing the election.
Right. And think of Trump laid down some heavy sanctions on Russia. Like, he did do some things, like, to sort of correct that behavior. I think that the easiest way to ensure non-election interference is give some of that power to the federal government. I think that's the easiest way.
Yeah.
And it does scare me a little bit because that's, like, straight in the Constitution. Like, states will have the right to, create their own elections or what have you. But I think that, like, federal cybersecurity efforts or, like, having, Homeland Security get involved to ensure that the polling places are okay, I think all of that would be good. Yeah,
definitely. I agree with that. And I think, like, and kind of back to China, like, I've been lucky that I've been able to travel to like a bunch of places in Asia, and China is one of them. And the craziest thing I've ever seen is we took a bullet train from Beijing to another city in like southern China, and the number of just like high rises and everything being built, like the construction projects that couldn't happen in America. There's not the infrastructure, there's not the investment, is like astounding. It's like massive cities popping up every like 10 minutes that are as big as any city in the United States. That's just, and the US can't do that because we're so like everything moves so slowly and there's not one group that has control, which I like about our political system. I think that's a good thing about our political system, is that kind of there's this opposition, but in China they just get stuff done, and it's scary to see.
Yeah. And we could have that, like we could have bipartisanship, but the problem is no one wants to. No one wants, and I think that would be the biggest flaw of Bernie Sanders, is I don't see him as a bipartisan person.
No, I don't either.
And I don't know what it's going to take. Like the establishment is designed so you're not going to get an independent candidate, not in the next 50 years.
No.
We will not see an independent candidate win the election in our lifetime.
Which is crazy. So I heard Brett Weinstein, the Evergreen College guy, he was talking about, I think it was on Joe Rogan, he was talking about what he thinks would like save America. They were talking in these big like kind of hyperbolic terms, but he said you get a president and a vice president that are both have a lot of power, like not a figurehead vice president like you usually have, like more like a Dick Cheney vice president. And he said you get one like kind of two moderates from either side of the political aisle, and put that together and just kind of form a government like that, where you have those kind of moderate opposing opinions in most positions. And to me that seems like a super interesting idea, that you could, like, if you could do that, and I feel like a lot of people would agree with that. A lot of people would be for that.
Yeah, see, I think it sounds good. Look at I'm not sure if you're familiar, but when John Adams got elected, his vice president, the way they used to have it
was whoever came in second place.
And who was John Adams' vice president? It was a really familiar name. It's just not coming.
I can't remember.
Anyway, they hated each other, and it was like literally nothing got done because they hated each other so much.
Yeah.
And like his whole cabinet was like all over the place. But that kind of makes me think of that, because as much as I would like things to be bipartisan, it's like I realize how hard it is to like step into a room with someone and come up with a solution for a very hot topic issue that is a compromise, right? You come together, like, but here's the thing, right? If Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump, Chuck Schumer, and Mitch McConnell meet and want to get an infrastructure bill done, that bill should be done. That is a non-partisan issue. Now, if they're talking about something like tax reform, criminal justice reform, these are more like nuanced issues.
There can be discrepancies.
Dude, they have been talking about an infrastructure bill since Trump got elected. There has been nothing done. And this is like a good thing about the Democrats' proposal for the coronavirus relief, is they wanted to include infrastructure in there. They wanted to include like payments on student loans. Like, these are all things that I strongly agree with. Like, if you're going to pass a $3 trillion stimulus, you might as well pass a $5 trillion stimulus, because it's like, if you're going to print money, you might as well print all the money in the Federal Reserve.
Gosh, yeah. And I just think it's crazy that things have gotten so partisan that it's like you can't, like, if Trump does something bad, no matter what it is, even if you looked at it not connected to Trump, it'd be good. Or like Democrats do something bad, but if like you'd agree with it. I mean, like, and I mentioned this earlier, but like the troop thing, like the pulling troops out of the Middle East, that seems like something that everyone should agree on. And people are coming out, like Democrats are coming out, and they're like, no, we actually need like Trump to or we need to, not Trump, the troops to stay in the Middle East because of this stuff. And it's like they're spouting like traditionally conservative talking points about war.
Trump. It's because it's Trump.
This is a Tim Pool term, but he calls it Trump derangement syndrome, TDS, because it's like just because it's Trump, it's bad.
The Democratic Party has shifted a lot from what it used to be. It used to be the party of the middle class. It used to be the party of FDR, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like all about the middle class, all about revitalizing the economy, social programs. Like these are all of the things. Even Obama, like even just 10 years ago, this is the stuff Obama wanted,
mm-hmm.
right? Now more than anything, it's the Democratic Party stands for things that I just don't think are important issues to people. Like their position on immigration, I just don't think that's super popular. I may or may not agree with it, but I just don't think that's super popular.
Yeah.
If you're trying to win an election, your position on hot topic issues has to be the same as a majority of the population. And then when you get elected, you can sort of teeter-totter on that issue, right? But when you have like Nancy Pelosi saying, we need to do all of this stuff with immigration, we need to, and I don't think she's ever said open borders, but certainly she's come pretty close.
And there are people within the Democratic Party that have said open borders.
Right. It's like you need to maintain control of your party and make sure that these ideas don't make it out to the American public and don't represent your party, because you're going to lose another election. And I think they've already sort of thrown it away. I mean, Joe Biden from the very get-go has struggled with communicating solid ideas, solid plans that can adhere to like what the super liberals think and what the moderate liberals think.
Yeah.
Right? And I think liberals, it is getting more, like I think the radical left is getting bigger. I think it's going to make up a bigger percentage of the Democratic Party than most people think it will. But I think if you don't meet in the... See, I say that, but...
There's got to be some compromise,
the radical left,
though.
like, doesn't want to compromise. Like, moderates will, right? And that's what drives me crazy, is it's like, you have the radical left that has been, like, dominating my party for so long, but no one wants to, like, push back on that, right? Like, I don't know. It's just weird that... the policies that the radical left wants are actually becoming mainstream, because some of their policies are insane. They're insane.
Yeah.
Open borders, that will never, ever, ever work. Do you know what that does? Do you know what open borders would do? It would destroy the economy. It would literally be the end of the American way of life.
Yeah.
There would be a mass influx of immigration from Mexico that would take American jobs, and I know that's a talking point the conservatives love, and I'm very careful about using that. But it's true. They would accept minimum wage jobs, and you have American workers that would essentially be unemployed, that aren't willing to do certain jobs when immigrants typically are. And this would be catastrophic for the middle class. And then the radical left will tell you, we're all about the middle class. We believe everyone should be equal. It's like, no, you don't. Do you have any idea what this would do? Open borders would make factory owners the richest people ever. Ever.
Yeah.
It would save them so much money. No health benefits, no unions, nothing. And that's what they want, right?
Yeah,
that's why I
exactly.
think like the liberals, like, this is why they pander to these big tech companies. This is why they pander to these big factory owners, and they just pretend like they don't.
Well, and like
because
the
these low-paying jobs,
all that stuff.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. What do you think? Call it here?
Let's call it.
Good?
Let's call it here.
Sweet.
Let's call it. That was fun.